Welcome to another edition of Leadership and Leadership. Boy, it's starting off right.
You find a workout plan you're on.
Right? Leadership and Legal Live is what I'm trying to say. I think the exhaustion is finally kicking in. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Let's be serious. My name's Steve Lowisz. James Reid, Attorney James Reid, is joining us as always. The whole idea behind Leadership and Legal Live is, although we have some fun, it's also to answer some serious questions that you, the audience, is providing to us. Now, in just a minute, in about 5 minutes, we're going to have a third person joining us, Daniel Russell from Trion Solutions, where we can have a much more in-depth conversation around some of the things surrounding Black Lives Matter, racism, and some of the other things. But we're going to start off a little softer. James, thanks again for being here.
No, I'm super excited to be here, and I appreciate all the comments that everyone's giving us because we're going to answer some of those tough questions. And there was a little controversy last time about some interpretations of our messaging.
Well, and that's actually the point. One of the reasons that we invited Dan to come on is, I mean, let's face it, you had two white guys up here talking about some of the diversity issues, and we did have some questionable comments, and not questionable in a negative way. I think they were constructive comments about we need to have some diversity, we need to have some females, and so on. So we're doing that, and Dan will be here. And Dan is an African American individual. You'll see that when he walks in. But I think he's got some great perspectives on some of the stuff that we're going to talk about.
Definitely.
And for next month, we're going to have females join us as well. And I think we need to have everybody's perspective. But the questions that we try to address come from the audience.
That's right.
And here's what's happening, just so everybody's aware of this, is that more and more and more people are sending in questions and they want to remain anonymous. Why do you think that is?
I think that the country is the most divided it's been, we know, with politics and the workplace. And I think with BLM and LGBTQ, if you're not outright solely supporting those causes, you're deemed a racist or a horrible negative person. So if you ask a question or show any ignorance, sometimes it could be interpreted as you're not inclusive and against the culture.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some of those things when Dan gets here. But I want to start with some other questions that came through until Dan gets here. Then we'll focus on some of the others. So here's one of the first ones, because the election is next week. And I know you saw this, right? What is my legal obligation as an employer when it comes to allowing my team to leave the office and vote next week? And hey, we're gonna enter. You don't have to do that, Dan. Come on up.
You're on live.
How you doing? Good. Glad you're here with us.
I'm glad to be here.
So we were just talking about the fact that you were going to join us.
I am joining.
Thank you for making it. Dan Russell, please introduce yourself. Look straight, and we'll go to that camera, I guess. Everybody knows James and I, but please introduce yourself.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Dan Russell. I'm National Director of Corporate Sales for Trion Solutions, and we take care of about, a few thousand people across all 50 states as it pertains to HR, payroll, all that fun stuff. And recently, I've just had the pleasure of speaking on diversity, inclusion, and all these challenges we're going through right now. And man, I'm excited to sit down with both of you this morning and tackle some of these fun topics.
Now, the two of you have known each other for quite some time.
We go
in
back.
all fairness.
Yes.
Okay, we just met.
That's true.
And where'd we meet?
We met at the Michigan SHRM conference, but if we want to be more specific, we met in his suite. So, are we not? Wait, this is live, right? Okay, so we
now be a little. Okay, no rumors out there.
Yeah, it was
the conference room portion of the suite.
Yes.
So we got to talking about some of the issues, and I mean, we can joke about some of these things, but some of these issues that we're going to talk about today are pretty serious.
Yeah, they are. They are, and I think a lot of people now. It's time for the gloves to come off, right?
Yeah.
And it's time for us to get real. It's time for us to have some real honest questions and some straightforward answers, because otherwise, I think a lot of people are just struggling right now, and they're reaching for what to do and not doing much.
Yeah. If you guys, anybody who's watching LinkedIn Live, so this is on LinkedIn Live, this is on Facebook Live, this is all over the place, it's also on Zoom and so on. Awesome. If you have any problems with it buffering, just refresh your screen. Sometimes initially with LinkedIn Live it gets a little choppy. So we're gonna get to some of the topics at hand here really quickly. But there's a couple of questions that I wanted to make sure that really don't hit the race thing yet.
Okay.
I want to hit a couple of other items first, and then let's get into the kind of the harder stuff. But the question that I was asking, and I want to get your legal opinion on it. One of the first All these questions come from the audience.
Awesome.
We don't make any of them up. Okay. Most of them come anonymous now. They don't want their names used. Okay.
That's
But this one was, again, what is my legal obligation as an employer when it comes to allowing my team to leave the office to vote next week?
So,
is there a legal obligation?
It's a great question. There is no federal law entitlement to employees to take time off.
Okay.
And there's no state law in Michigan either to allow employees to take time off. Some states have laws that if you don't have a voting window, if you're required to work the full voting hours that they're open, then you are able to take, an hour off to go vote. But many states don't have any requirements and they're silent on it. However, I would say most companies allow their employees
Go do what you got to do.
Go do what you got to do, and it's a handbook policy that many employers are including in the handbook.
Again, James gave the exact answer, right? And if somebody has a question there, I say ask your employer.
Yeah.
And I think everybody respects the fact that our voting right is something that, gosh, people fought for years. Years ago, I couldn't vote, or my ancestors, I would say, couldn't vote.
Sure.
So I think a lot of employers will give you that leeway, but don't take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed.
Don't take advantage of it and take a 2-hour lunch and say, "Oh, the line was long."
Right.
Or hey, I'll say this: if the line is long or something like that, snap a picture.
Send it in.
Let your HR director know. Listen, I'm trying to do my God-given right to vote, and the line is pretty long.
And I'm seeing more of the mailing in your ballot. My wife and I mailed ours in. Yeah.
I dropped mine off right at the city clerk.
Yeah.
I didn't want it getting there late. I walked it in. Here it is.
Yes.
So we're good. Okay, question number 2. Again, we're going to get to the other subjects here in a second. The Michigan Supreme Court struck down the governor's powers in the state of Michigan. Can I force my team to come back into the office right now?
So that was the common thought and question, and the answer is no. Immediately after it was struck down, OSHA basically rubber stamped the majority of the content of the executive orders, and now we have an absolute legal requirement to have a COVID plan and a COVID training and do training on any updates. So you want to make sure that you are still following the masks in the office.
And now, if there's ever been a time to lean on experts, James and I talk almost every week on something like this, right? We've got 5 attorneys on staff. We still lean on partners like James and Densmore. And the bouncing back and forth now, people cannot just guess.
Yeah.
And they can't say, well, that's just wrong. This is what we're going to do. That will have you in court.
Yeah, you got to follow the law. And it's not a selfish plug because I think you're a good attorney, right? And if you have questions on this kind of stuff and you just validated it, James is a perfect person to go to if you're in HR, if you're leading a business, it doesn't matter. And in most states, you have covered through the size
License
of the firm.
in 37
anyways.
states.
Yeah, so this is not something to screw with at this point because the potential repercussions of doing something you're not supposed to do are pretty significant.
Well, and Steve, also to James' point, it's different in every state.
Yeah.
Right? So you may have employees that are in Tennessee, California, Texas, and Michigan. You cannot make a blanket statement across all states and say you're covered. Right. So this is, again, where you have to say, okay, well, if I tell one employee they can do this, another employee they can do that, you may potentially have someone saying, you're discriminating against me because I live in Texas.
That's right.
Right? So you've got to seek counsel. Don't just make a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, and that's why you have 5 attorneys on staff, too, for the work that you guys do.
And to make it one step more complicated, each county has their own requirements. So Washington, Oakland... So
don't guess is what they're saying.
That's right.
There's no question about it. Let's do what's right. Okay, I'm going to do one more from the top, and then we're going to get into some of the other stuff. David, so we're going to be a little bit out of order with some of the questions. So we're going to go to how much should I share about the impact of COVID on our business? I don't want to scare my employees, but I want to be honest. It's not a legal question. It's more of kind of a general leadership question.
Well, there is an element of legal.
Okay.
And you have to decide beyond that. So the 2 elements of legal are, 1, you're not supposed to disclose the name.
Of the person that happens to have COVID.
That has COVID.
Okay.
And then 2, if somebody was exposed to an employee that has COVID for 15 minutes or more over a 24-hour period, so it could be 3 5-minute interactions, you by law have to notify them.
Really?
Yes. And you also have to call your local health department. So those are the nuances that you have to be aware of. So that's why there's a lot of contract tracing. So like at the Michigan SHRM conference, we were taking attendance of who was there just in case.
Temperature, all
knock
that
on
stuff.
wood, no, we're unaware of anyone that had any symptoms of COVID at that conference. But you have to notify vendors, customers, and employees.
What about the financial impact,
was
though? And
just
I
gonna
think
say
that's
that.
where the question
Yeah.
was going
Right,
as
sure.
well. So how much do you share? Because COVID hit, I think, all of our business to a certain extent,
Yeah.
some more so than others, and yours probably grew as a result of some of the
Our
liability.
practice area grew,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Well, and I think being transparent with your staff is important.
Yeah.
I think everyone knows how affected the entire country was with COVID. And like you said, how much do you share? You know, do you want to scare your employees? Do you want your employees knowing that your revenue decreased by 30% and now they're wondering, are we stable or is my job going to be okay? I think it's important to let your team know, here are the challenges we faced, here's our plan, and here's how we're going to pivot as an organization. Because I think if you don't tell them, the fear is already there.
Yeah.
They already know that people were furloughed. They already know that they were shut down for a number of weeks. Or they already see that there's less people coming into the restaurant, the retail location, whatever it is. So I think it's very important for people to share what their plan is. Because even something we did through COVID, we gave a daily update.
Yeah.
It was so important just for the employees to know, okay, well, I heard the governor said this. What does that mean? You know, what's our plan internally? You know, I didn't see my coworker next to me. Is everything okay? To James' point, like, are they sick? Are they okay? And we were letting people know. We have some employees working virtually. We have some employees working in the office. We were not, you know, disclosing who or what, but it's important to continuously update your staff so they have a pulse on where the organization is headed.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we did early on is we said, here's the impact that it's having on us, and we went pretty specific.
Yeah.
And here's the options we're considering. Because we wanted feedback from the team. And I think any good leader doesn't want to just say, this is the thing we're going to do. Let's get ahead of it. Here's some options we have, because we got some ideas from the team that none of us on the executive team even thought about.
Yeah.
So we got that feedback. Then we made the decisions. And this is what we're doing, given Enlighten, and we continued the follow-ups as well. So I think that's important to do. All right, I lied. I'm going to do one more question, then we're going to get into some other stuff. What do leaders need to focus on right now? Meaning, why do so many leaders seem unprepared to deal with and navigate in times of crisis? And the question was related to both the race thing and the COVID thing. Why is it starting to fall apart? And this is a great segue into the broader conversation that we were all having about some of these racial issues and the racial tensions.
Well, here's what I'm going to say first. Leaders lead. It's what we do, right? You look at the three of us right now. Somebody just asked me yesterday. They said, Dan, did I just see you were in Traverse City at 7:30, but then at 3 o'clock you were in Birmingham recording something? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, why'd you drive all the way to Traverse City? You know, you could have done it by Zoom. Yeah, I could have. But these people asked me to come up and speak about diversity and inclusion. I'm not going to blow them off and say, well, yeah, I'll do it from my living room or my home office on Zoom. Leaders lead. And right now, in times of trials and tribulation and just uncertainty, this is when leaders step up. And this is when we help other leaders develop.
Yeah.
Right? And so when people are watching us right now and they're looking, they're saying, James, you're telling me you didn't have any legal work to do today?
Right.
You didn't have anything? I mean, my goodness, your organization really, nothing's going on right now? Nobody's hiring? You know, nobody's,
Of course they are. We all know that.
yeah, nobody's looking for talented staff right now.
Right.
You know, we always have spare time. No, but we step up and we help leaders. And so I think now more than ever, this is when leaders rise. You know, in times of challenge, leaders rise. And we also turn around and look for other leaders who maybe are younger, maybe they have the pull and the feel and the need to do something, but they don't quite know how, and this is when we help them. But the most important thing I'll say is, as a leader, we lean on other leaders.
Yeah.
We do.
Right. This is when I call you and say, hey, Steve, what are you seeing, man? What are you seeing in the market? You and I can talk.
Yep.
You know, this is where I call James and I say, hey, James, this is dancing a line here, and I want to make sure I'm giving the right advice. What should I say? And I don't get to a point where I think I know everything. I lean on other leaders, and then we all develop as greater leaders.
I think as leaders, the more leadership experience we have, the more we realize what we don't know.
100%.
Some humility, right?
Right.
Yes.
What are your thoughts, James?
My main thoughts are, the COVID and BLM and LGBTQ, the theme I'm seeing, as you asked earlier before Dan got here, was, silence is dangerous right now. And so I think it's harder to communicate when people aren't in person in the office and meeting together as much to see the vibes and is someone's email, what's the intent behind that email, or how are they really feeling. So if someone's silent, like, what's your stance on COVID, your stance on BLM, are you going to change any plans, and you're silent, I think they're automatically assuming horrible things. They're assuming the worst. And I think that if you're silent on any issue right now, they're assuming you're a bad person, even though that may not be true.
So we bring up an interesting point, and you and I started to have this conversation, I think the two of you, but silent on BLM.
Yes.
Okay. You're black.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to make sure everybody, and I don't mean that in any jesting way, right?
Yes,
but you actually kind of said that to me when we were sitting in James's suite. I'm black.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not, no insult, and you know that.
Gloves off, guys. Listen, I'm going to say this for everybody watching live. We have a relationship, and Steve and I had a chance to talk, where I said, listen, when I come in, nothing's off limits.
Yeah.
Drop the gloves, let it fly, and if I can help you or you watching to maybe get an answer that you're scared to ask your neighbor, your coworker, your employee, guess what? Let it fly. So,
all right, so let's start there, because you mentioned it. BLM. Mm-hmm. Everybody's worked up about BLM. You just said if you don't take a position one way or the other, people automatically assume the worst. And let's talk about it from a business perspective. We had two white guys talking about this last month when we talked about this, and we got a little bit of grief because it was two white guys talking about it. So I want to position that with you. Kind of, what's your take on BLM as it relates to you, business, and what's your advice to leaders who are struggling with what to say? Because in the absence of saying anything, it's you're nasty, you're a racist, and so on.
Well, first off, what I'm going to say with Black Lives Matter, this statement, sometimes some people haven't liked it, but everybody is not subscribing to the Black Lives Matter movement, and there's a reason for that. The reason is the moment you say, I'm part of Black Lives Matter, you're part of everything that everyone saying it stands for. There's a lot of positive coming out of Black Lives Matter, okay? There's some negative, though. I don't think any of us agree that the riots are good. Shooting people, it's good. No, that is, in any way, shape, or form, that should be condemned. Now, the message that they're trying to push out of awareness and helping people to understand some of the challenges going on in the black community, that's very important. Yeah. It's very needed. But something I've said to people is this. Black Lives Matter is like if the three of us went to a breast cancer rally this afternoon. And we went there to raise money for breast cancer. And you see a lot of people saying, all lives matter. All lives matter. You shouldn't just say Black Lives Matter. All lives matter. So if we went this afternoon to a breast cancer rally, you would never see someone walk in and say, hey, what about prostate cancer? Huh? Right. Liver cancer matters. And my dad died of throat cancer. How dare you say that breast cancer is important? Now, when everybody takes a step back, we go, man, that makes sense. If you go home today and your wife says, Steve, do you love me? Honey, I love all people. I love our neighbors. I love my parents. I love all people. You may need to talk to him about the divorce attorneys at Dinsmore, right? Yeah. But all of a sudden, people have to take a step back and say, why does it bother me so much? Okay, first off, are the challenges real? Yes. James and I have spoke on panels where I've shared some things that were painful because I've had friends, just over candid, low down, just backyard conversation go, Dan, come on. Really? I mean, some of the stuff they're talking about, it's not real, right? Come on. I mean, you don't get profiled by the police.
Well, I'm going to have you share that in a second. So come back to that in a second.
But, here's the thing. As organizations, we have to say, okay, it's not about subscribing to Black Lives Matter. Let's stop there. Let's not all jump on a bandwagon. How about what does your organization stand for? What do you stand for as the leader of that organization? The moment we get away from trying to jump on bandwagons and we just say, here's our mission. Here's what our organization stands for. We believe in diversity, inclusion, and acceptance of all people. That's black, that's white, that's Native American Indian, that's Asian American, that's Indian American, that's the Chaldean community, that's the Jewish community, right? All of a sudden you start to say, hey, I'm not saying black lives don't matter. I'm saying they matter. And I'm saying I'm going to make sure nobody is discriminated against. That's when people kind of back down. Instead of, hey, how dare you sit here as a white man and try to tell me what it's like to be a black man? No. Now I go, okay, you're trying to help. You're trying to help a movement. You're trying to help all people to not be discriminated against. That's where we have to get to.
And you do a lot of training on this whole thing, too.
I do a ton of training. I think the biggest lesson I learned for white people is, especially HR, they're trained you're not allowed to take race into account in your employment decisions because it's illegal. However, talking with Dan and other professionals, we don't want to hear you're colorblind in the workplace. We don't want to hear that we're pretending we don't know how you're feeling right now when things are going on that are unfair. So I think that people want to still be acknowledged for who they are and don't want to be colorblind.
So we've talked about that in particular because there's a kind of a movement saying, well, I don't see color. Well, with the exception of you being colorblind, right. We see color.
Yeah.
I see you, you see me, we look different, our skin's a different color. You guys have hair, I don't.
Right.
I mean, there's all kinds of, and obviously I'm joking about that piece, but this idea of we don't see color, I can't subscribe to that because I see color and I believe you see color.
Well, and when people say that, right, they don't, this is where we have to stop and think about our verbiage that we use.
Yeah.
Be like me saying I don't see that James has dark hair and you have no hair. I don't see that on you, Steve. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Right? Now, what I'm trying to say is I don't see you differently or judge you differently because of that. Now, why that's so important is think about if your kid, maybe let's just say 15, 16 years old or even younger, hears that comment. Oh, that's James. I don't see James as white. Right. Well, wait, should I see James as white? Right. Should I? Well, maybe if I see James as white, that's a bad thing. If James says, "Oh, that's Dan," no, we don't see Dan as black. That's just Dan. Wait. Why is it bad to see Dan as black? Right. So when you start to hear that, and over the years, and my goodness, for anybody right now who's watching that's black, and I would bet $1 at least that they've all heard this once. Oh, you don't talk black. You're not black. Listen, guys, I told you. I told you.
Okay, I bet you there's some people watching this saying that's the case.
Right. And there are people, unfortunately, that have said it, and it's one of those things where you go, well, yeah, I've said it. I've had people tell me, well, Dan, you're not black. I mean, you know what I mean. And listen, I'll tell you, for most of those, I've gone and just kind of bit my tongue.
Yeah.
But there's been a couple times where I've said, I don't understand. What do you mean I'm not black?
And what's the response?
And they go, well, you don't talk black. And I go, well, how do you speak a color? I'm confused. And they go, well, you're not like ghetto or just slang and you know what I mean. You're not black. And I go, so wait, you're saying I don't appear to be uneducated? And they go, well, yeah. And I go, oh, so the way I speak or dress, a little more polished. They go, yeah, you get it. And I go, so you're saying that to be black is the opposite of that? And they freeze.
Yeah.
Because the challenge you're saying, so again, think about what you're saying. Think about what your kid just heard. To be black is to be uneducated. To be black is to be ghetto or slang. And now when you see someone that is not, you're saying they're not black. Well, no, I'm still very much black. However, I am highly educated, thank God. I've been, around a lot of other great leaders and people that have helped me become who I am. But when now someone can say, Dan's black, Dan's highly educated, Dan's a very good speaker, and Dan is black, it changes the perspective of what black is. But when you start to say, well, you're not black because you're not some of the negative things or some of the negative connotations, you're now saying to be black is to be bad.
Does it also happen in reverse?
Absolutely.
So I'm talking about in the black community. If it's like can you be too white?
Yeah.
And what happens?
Well, listen, anybody who wants to say reverse racism isn't there, let's the three of us go hang out, and I will just say the inner city. I'm not going to put a city name on
Okay.
it. We all hang out in the inner city. First off, dressed like this, we're all in trouble. Okay, we're going to stick out like a sore thumb. People may make us feel uncomfortable, and we may run into some problems. Now, if we all dress down and get dropped off in a predominantly black community, you guys may have some challenges. They may make you feel uncomfortable. And come on, again, guys, I said gloves are off.
Yeah, that's
Anybody
the
who
point.
has ever been in maybe a inner city, and all of a sudden everybody else doesn't look like you, guess what? You're getting it the other way. And yes, if you are white, maybe you go into an all-black establishment or all-black community, you are made very uncomfortable at times in different places. So it's the exact same thing. And can you be too white? Can you be too black? You know, that I don't know how to say that because I don't know what being too white or too black is. Can you be too mean? Can you be too hateful?
Sure.
Yeah. But can you be too white? I wouldn't even know what that is, right?
Yeah,
What's your take, James?
I see this a lot in sports. You know, Dan was an athlete at Michigan State,
Yep.
and I see in the NBA when black professional athletes make a comment on a white basketball player, it's kind of just a joke, no big deal, because everyone's black and a lot of the announcers are black. But if a white player said a comment about a black player, they'd probably be suspended from the league.
James, it's so when you just said that story. I remember being in high school in the 90s, and a bunch of guys were shooting around playing hoops, getting ready, and a kid walks in. We'd never seen this kid before. Happened to be a white kid. It's about maybe 6'3". We said, hey, we need one more to play. And he goes, all right. And we were like, man, I don't know if this white kid can play. Right. And so, you know, everybody's kind of, and so the kid says, can I get one warm-up? They throw him the ball. He just kind of slips his warm-ups off, takes one dribble, jumps up, windmill, dunked it, and went, all right, I'm good. And everybody went, who is this kid?
Right.
So there was an assumption.
Yeah, he just transferred, and the kid ended up winning high jump for us that year, but the back of his varsity jacket, circa 1991 or 2, said white men can jump. Right? One of the greatest movies out there.
Yes,
But
yes.
think about it. Can you imagine a movie coming out today, White Men Can't Jump?
No.
Whew. Right? But, you know, when we say that, one of the most painful jokes I ever heard from somebody one time was they said, hey, how do you hide $100 from a black man? And I go, not sure. They said, hide it under his work boot.
What'd
and
you
I
do?
looked at him and I went, I'm sorry, I don't get the punchline. And I made them stop. He's, oh, you know what I mean. No, I don't.
Yeah.
I go to work every day. There's never been a day I haven't. Had a job since I was 11 years old. But
Right.
that joke gets spread. That's what happens.
Right.
So you talked about some stories at the MySherm conference, specifically, I think, with your son.
Yeah.
So I share that. Just talk a little bit about what you shared, because I think that'll be impactful.
Well, you know, there's two stories recently that stand out for me. The first story was my family was on vacation, and we have a big family. We have 6 kids, and we had the older kids' girlfriends and boyfriends, and you know, our family, you're going to see everything in our house. You're going to see black, you're going to see white, you're going to see Hispanic, you're going to see white. That's just the Russell family, and that's just who we are.
Yeah.
But we're on vacation, and my daughter, we're up right around the Traverse City area, and my daughter asked my 11-year-old, will you go out to the car and grab my charger? 17-year-old, you know, kind of getting the little guy to do something. He goes, no, I'm not going. She goes, I'll give you $1. He goes, no, not going. She says, I'll give you $5. And we're like, he's going outside for $5, you know, to
Right.
grab a charger. And he goes, uh-uh. And then he goes, with everything going on right now, I can't go outside. And he starts bawling and hides his face behind my wife. My wife and I looked at each other in the pain we felt at that moment. We had not had a conversation with our kid about any of this going on. We didn't talk about the riots. We didn't talk about police brutality. We didn't talk about any of this. But what he had seen on social media, what he had seen or heard from friends, he was scared to go outside in this beautiful community because of what he said was going on right now. So we as parents went, we have to address this with our 11-year-old. Now, most parents go, well, why? Well, as a black father, I have to have conversations with my kids that unfortunately, James, or you don't have to have with your kids. It's sad, but it's real. The other story that you and I talked about was my son was out for a jog in the community we live in at 5 a.m.
Yep.
Phone goes off. I was half asleep, so I didn't get it. My wife answers her phone, and she goes, "What? He's on his way right now." Hangs up and said, "Someone just tried to run him over." And so I go speeding up the street to go pick him up. The look on his face, as a father looking at my 21-year-old son, number one, I'm going to tell you, I'm sorry, full transparency, I was pissed off. Right? Any parent that could say that they wouldn't, please give me a call and help me with how I'm supposed to stay a little more even-keeled when someone tries to run your kid over and kill them. But this car drove, circled around, drove past again, circled back around, and then waited. And as he went to pass by, they sped up and tried to hit him. It's 5 a.m. He didn't do anything to anybody. He was out for a jog. The only thing he did that morning was he was black. Now, he's also Native American Indian, he's also Hispanic, and he's also white. But what they saw was he was black. And it almost cost him his life.
So, playing devil's advocate here a second, how do you know that that's what they saw?
Well, maybe it isn't. Maybe it is. All I know that morning was somebody tried to kill my kid.
But how do you know that it wasn't a white guy and 3 black guys, or a black guy and 3 white guys?
Well, he did see there was one guy in the car. He did see was a white male.
Okay.
That was all he saw. Now, can I say for sure that's why he did it? I can't. Unfortunately, I'm probably right. But maybe I'm not. But what happened that morning, and I want to make sure everybody realizes this, I said to my son, we are not going to be mad at a community. We are not going to be mad at a race. But we can be mad at that person.
Sure.
That we're going to be allowed to do. And we'll have to get over it, but we can be mad at that one person.
Right. And you've had bad experiences with police and profiling. Not to get into the stories, but at the same time, you've also said you're not supportive of defund the police, and you do support Blue Lives Matter.
Oh my goodness. Some of my closest friends are police officers. I love them. I appreciate what they do. I appreciate all police. And I've told people, hey, it's great to get on this bandwagon and start saying something. How about somebody breaks in your house tonight? What are the first 3 numbers you're calling? It's 911.
So that's not a popular position now. I mean, we've had a little bit of that here in the Metro Detroit area, but it's become a really big issue in Seattle, D.C., and some other areas. You're kind of taking the opposite side.
I sure am. And you know what, again, as a leader, my job is to stand for what's right.
Yeah.
My job is not to jump on the comfortable bandwagon. And anybody right now that wants to say, we're going to generalize all police and all police are racist, they're all prejudiced, well, you're doing the exact opposite of what you're saying you don't want people to do to us. So you're saying you don't want black people to be generalized, you don't want black people to be grouped into a category of criminals and people who steal and people who are uneducated. So you don't want blacks to be generalized, but we want to turn around and generalize whites or generalize police or generalize anybody, government. Well, guess what? When we do that, we move further away from the goal than moving closer to the goal of bringing people together. But I will say this, do we all need to be educated? Yes. Do people in the inner city need to be educated on maybe how to handle a situation when a police officer shows up? Do police need continuous improvement and continuous education? Of course. Anybody that would say that what they endure on a daily basis does not promote, any type of mental challenges and stress and strife, oh my goodness, their life is on the line every day.
Yeah.
So yes, they need counseling. Yes, they need ways to improve the interaction with, communities. It's tough though.
And James, jump in on this, but I'm going to ask a question. How do you, since you've got your son, you've got 2 kids. Six kids, you're right. How do you balance the two? In one side, you're saying, hey, we're black, this is true, this could happen, because it's happened. You've experienced it yourself. But on the other side, we need to support those that are good. And there's a lot of great cops, as you already say. How do you balance the two with your kids? Because I think by extension, it's a broader conversation.
Yeah. Well, listen, you just said it, right? It's people. We look at people. If this person is bad, then we address that. But they don't speak for all people. If this one person does something to me and they have the same skin color as James didn't do it to me. That person did. And yes, listen, anybody wants to say police brutality is not taking place, come on. George Floyd, 8 minutes, 46 seconds. Now, again, not a popular statement, but I told you guys the gloves were off. I'm not talking about what George Floyd did before that day, because what George Floyd did before that day, I don't think anybody would say that breaking into someone's home and putting a gun to a pregnant woman's belly in an armed robbery, that's not good. And that person doesn't speak for all black people. But what we're saying is that day, what happened to him shouldn't happen to a black person, a white person, a male, a female, an animal, anything. So that, I think, was the painful part of it. But again, you can't judge all people by one person's actions. That's what Martin Luther King Jr. was trying to promote years ago.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be judged by the content of my character, not the color of my skin. That's what should be for all people. And so, how do you handle it with your kids? That's the conversation. You know, you and I have talked about it, right? The actual conversation with your kid. Take the gloves off, guys. Don't sugarcoat this. Because what you don't tell your kid, their friend at school will.
Yeah.
Social media will. Music will. A movie will. And then all of a sudden your kid is getting a whole bunch of stuff in their head that they're trying to process, but they don't know what dad and mom actually believe. Because dad and mom didn't want to have the conversation.
So all that stuff that they're seeing is actually forming their opinion aside from what dad and mom said. So if all I see is police brutality, that's all I'm going to think of every cop, white, black, indifferent. It doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah, you know, I have a couple of comments. Dan said it gracefully well, but I'm also a realist and know that because George Floyd was black, Dan took it more personal than the average white person. He did a moment of silence with all 6 of his kids for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to just sit there and relive, I guess, the uncomfortable and despicable moment that occurred. I think, though, the best way to approach this, I like the individual, don't judge a book by its cover, focus on the facts at hand, but Johnny Taylor said it well at the SHRM conference that by definition, diversity means that you understand different perspectives and different points of view, and you welcome those. We don't want everyone to be a yes man and agree with one point of view. Yeah. That's against diversity.
Yeah, we actually talked about that a bit. Is sometimes it seems like diversity is for everybody, but a white person.
Right. Right. I mean, listen, Steve. When we start talking about some of the shootings, right? Where somebody says this cop shot this person so many times, or now listen, one of the things I'll say before I say the statement is none of us were there.
Yeah, right? True.
None of us were there. We got what the media gave us. We got maybe what this video cam or police dash cam showed. None of us have seen the whole thing. But what I'll say is all of these people are reacting out of fear. When that cop pulls up, the black man had fear because of everything he's heard, everything he's seen, everything he's been taught, that this cop is here and this cop's going to kill me. This cop is bad. This cop is racist. And he's trying to avoid. He's attacking. He starts off in that manner. But then, put yourself in the other shoes. This cop is showing up, and what's the story in his mind? Oh, the police officer that was shot and killed yesterday. He wants to get home to his family. He now has a heightened sense of fear. So both sides are reacting out of fear. So when that happens, and now this person's reaching in their car, what is it? What is he reaching for? And it's bam, 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 bam. It's wrong. It's wrong that the person got killed, but everybody's reacting out of fear. So that part is where when we continue to educate, when we continue to bring people together and let the sides actually talk about why they have this trepidation, why all of a sudden when I get pulled over, it doesn't matter where. Listen, James may get scared, you may get scared, I may have a different type of fear, but we all maybe have a little bit of fear. Mine just may be a little different.
But you also talked about, and one of the things I appreciated when we were chatting, because you just, look, this guy just kind of lays it all out, but you said when you get pulled over, 10 and 2.
Oh, absolutely.
Why do you do 10 and 2?
It's the first thing I was taught as a kid when I got my driver's license. It was 10 and 2, you be respectful, you do not talk back, and you know what, as James said, yeah, one time when I was not in Michigan, and I was down in Tennessee, and my hands were at 10 and 2, and yeah, I got pulled out of a car. I still don't know what I did wrong, other than having Michigan plates. I was called boy continuously. Now I want to make sure you guys heard what I just said. He didn't open my car door and get me out. I got pulled through the window, slammed on the hood, and yeah, I got my tail kicked by several police officers that night. And you curl up in a ball and you hope you're not the next statistic. But you're sitting here going, what did I do? What did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. I had my hands at 10-2. Now, as much as I can tell that story, I can also tell the story of, I got pulled over, and I will call out the police department because I love this police department. Bloomfield Hills, I got pulled over, and you know what? I actually did a no turn on red. Sorry, I was guilty of it.
Did you have to call him?
Thank God I didn't that time. But I had just picked my daughter up from basketball practice in an inner city community.
Yeah.
It was a little bit dangerous. My gun is sitting right here. Okay, I have my license for my gun.
Yep.
So, as soon as I get pulled over, I've got my driver's license, I've got my CPL, and I'm sitting here like this. He comes to the window, registration driver. I hand him my driver's license and CPL at the same time, which is a great thing to do.
Always, always.
He looks at it and he says, okay, so do you have your weapon on you? Yes, sir, I do. He says, where is it? No, I'm not doing this. And he goes, okay. He says, well, what kind of weapon do you carry? Now, mind you, my 17-year-old daughter is sitting right here, which for those of you that look at my Facebook or anything else, when you look at my 17-year-old daughter, her complexion is more of yours, not mine. Blondish brown hair.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like she's my daughter. We have had more time sitting at a restaurant that people stare at us and make us feel uncomfortable because they think I've got a teenage white girl sitting with me. And she'll look and go, Dad, should I write help me on a napkin? Thank God for her sense of humor.
At least you can have a little bit of fun with it, right?
But her eyes were like this. She was terrified. And the guy goes, what kind of gun do you carry? I said, Ruger LC9. He says, it's a good gun. I have one of those too. I said, yes, sir, it is. He goes, why do you have it right there? And I said, well, I just picked my daughter up from basketball practice. It was a dangerous neighborhood. He says, okay. And he says, well, did you know you did a no turn on red there? And I said, actually, I didn't. And he goes, okay. And he lets me go. So the way I handled myself, now I'm not going to say, now make sure don't take this out of context. I'm not going to say, oh, well, if everybody handled it that way, this would never happen. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is I handled that situation to the best of my ability to be respectful, to treat him as a professional, and he in turn responded back with professionalism and respect. Could have given me a ticket. Could have pulled me out of the car. Could have said, wait, here's a black man with a gun right there. I'm uncomfortable. But instead, it ended up being a great story.
And I think it's a perfect an example for all people, though. Mm-hmm. Not just, hey, so every black kid should follow what you did because they're black. Like, I don't care if you're black or white. There's crap on both sides, on all sides, right? And if all of us had a little bit more respect for the other, we probably wouldn't have as much fear going on and so on. So I would take that and say, all of you that have kids, or if you're watching and you're younger, there is a certain level of respect that I think overall we've lost in humanity. Yeah. And it ain't a black or white thing, it's an everybody thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. It is. A couple of things that come to mind. I'm really lucky to have a friend like Dan that we can talk. Like when all my clients wanted a Juneteenth policy.
Yeah.
And I talked to Dan, and Dan's like, well, one, if that's all they're doing, don't bother. But two, I was like, I actually had to look it up and understand the history of Juneteenth. And I'm like, I'm not an uneducated man. I'm actually training on diversity and inclusion and things. So I go to Dan. Dan goes, I never heard of it either. My family and I was like, what's that?
This is the first year I've ever heard of it.
We had to look it up.
Yeah. No, I knew what it was. I didn't know they had given us a holiday. I was like, all right. I was like, I got any extra birthdays out there I didn't know about?
Hey, go ahead.
There was Sis was doing a keynote 2 days ago about cancel culture. Yeah. And he's a black NFL receiver, now he's a lot of public speaking. He goes, I never heard of cancel culture. I had to look it up what it is. So a lot of these things, if you feel like you're trying to educate yourself and you don't already know everything, don't feel embarrassed, don't feel ashamed. I think a lot of this terminology, is new to a lot of people, and I think you just got to talk it through.
Can I ask some of these questions? Because I
Please.
think people are probably watching this
Yeah.
and saying, hey, I sent you. We're not going to get to all of them, but I want to throw a couple of questions out. If we go over time, we go over time. It's our time.
All right, let's
All
go.
right. So no particular order, but I'm going to go from the top down. Isn't affirmative action by its definition racist? I didn't write it down. It's just a question. Isn't affirmative action by its definition racist? If you're saying you have to hire a black man or a black woman or so on, isn't that by definition racist?
I think that's the interpretation, but to me, affirmative action is more than just race and sex. I want people that are also disabled, people that are visual learners, vocal learners, more people that are hands-on. I want different perspectives and stuff, people that are from different parts, different cultures, and
Yep.
bringing ideas together. It doesn't mean just add more minorities to your workforce, to me.
And that goes back to, as an organization, explain what you mean with that, right? But if you said, if you ask most people what affirmative action is, their definition, you're right, would be deemed as, racist or reverse racist.
Yeah.
But when you look at the crux of it, exactly, James just nailed it. It's about just providing open and equal opportunity for all people. Special needs adults. We have an amazing organization in Rochester, Dutton Farms, that they give employment to people who have special needs and challenges. So guess what? That's the same thing. So again, it's about, what does it really mean to you?
Why do you think that and I believe this to be the case, that some people have kind of hijacked what it was originally meant to be, and all of a sudden we look at it and say, like this question, by definition racist? Why do you think it's gotten there?
It makes people uncomfortable on both sides,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's going to make somebody uncomfortable if they say, wait a minute, so you're telling me if I've got a black candidate, a white candidate, the white candidate's more qualified, the black candidate's less qualified, but my company told me I'm supposed to promote diversity and inclusion. Am I not supposed to hire the white guy? Am I supposed to do this? Because again, it hasn't been fully explained to that hiring manager maybe in the full purpose. And I think it causes people confusion.
Like one issue is U of M, I think, has like 40% plus of the engineers that graduate are women.
Yeah.
But when you look at most of the engineering companies around, they're 90% plus men.
Yep.
And so they're basically saying the candidates probably are there. Is there something they're doing in the application process? Or is their culture already so male dominant that when women come there, they don't feel comfortable like they have colleagues?
Well, James, you've talked about also like somebody's name.
Right.
If somebody sees somebody's name on a resume and it sounds more cultural, that they may not even get the phone call back, and people have changed their names to try to get the initial interview.
So we actually tested this. I'm not going to tell you who the client was, but a large Fortune 500 organization, and I sat over the recruiter team's shoulder for a period of days, and I watched them look at LinkedIn profiles, right? Look, boom, boom, boom. And there's two places their eyes, because you can do the mapping of where your eyes go on and where your mouse goes and so on. Two things that it went to: picture, name. Picture, name. And you could see them go, basically, right? In essence. Scrolling by those. Just, it boggles my mind.
Yep.
And yet some of the recruiters were actually non-white people that were actually doing it.
Right.
So it was interesting that it just didn't make any sense to me. But that's a serious problem.
It is, and I can't tell you how many times early in my career where maybe I spoke to someone on the phone and then I showed up and they went,
You're black?
Dan Russell, nice to meet you. And I smile, and I actually had people tell me, Dan, when I initially spoke to you on the phone, I thought you were a white guy.
Really?
Really? And I'm like, okay, but at least 40 or 50 times I've heard that.
So I want to ask another question, because it's one that you and I talked about when Terry was here. So we had Terry Bean a couple of months ago, and I had one opinion. Yours was similar, and then Terry had a little different opinion. I want to get your opinion. Same question: do you have to be diverse in order to be a head of diversity and inclusion?
No. You
Why
do
not? Why not?
Listen, diversity and inclusion, as James just said, it's about all people. You have to have the right mindset to be a leader of diversity and inclusion. You have to have the right vision. You have to have the right perspective. You have to have the ability to say, let's look at other people's perspectives. How about I take that hard question of what you just said? Are we disqualifying people for these reasons? You can be black, you can be white, you can be Asian, you can be Indian. It doesn't matter. You can be the head of diversity and inclusion for our country if you want to. You don't have to have a color to be able to, represent all people. You just have to have the heart and passion to really see the world as all people, and all people being equal, and all people being able to have the same opportunity. I just said it yesterday. Most people miss this in the I Have a Dream speech. Let's call it what it is. Most people heard the I Have a Dream speech on Black History Month, which, by the way, is the shortest month of the year. We got the 28 days. It's a fun joke. But, listen, we heard the speech in elementary school or junior high, and most of us heard the beginning. Few of us know the end. But there's something in there right toward the end where Martin Luther King starts to talk about Jews and Gentiles, Catholics, Protestants. He's talking about all people, wanting to see people be able to walk hand in hand, and again, be judged by the content of their character. That, not the color of their skin. That is what you need to be ahead of diversity and inclusion.
I actually had the reverse happen. I think I told you about this. So I was speaking at an HR conference. I won't say which one. It was in Chicago. And I happened to be speaking on diversity. All right, this is something that, so I will not tell you I was not racist when I was younger. In fact, quite the opposite, right? Yeah. Because that was my perspective, right? I joked to a certain extent, our idea of diversity at the time was what color tie did we wear?
Right.
Went to private school and everybody looked like me and came from the same background as me. It wasn't until later in life. So I share this story. As I'm talking about it, people start commenting online. What's the white guy doing talking about diversity? I can't believe this HR conference picked the white guy to talk about diversity. But I was talking about it from the angle that I experienced, right? And I think that's an important discourse to have as well, until I realized, when I got to college and I realized, so two of my roommates happened to be African American, and I walk in the first day and it's like, what the hell's happening to me? They became some of my closest friends over time. It's like, oh my gosh. But the same thing happens. Now it's an extreme example, but it just shows that there's some problems out there.
But see, think about what you just said though. I cannot speak to what it means to be a white male in what culture you grew up in. So you may be able to speak to someone who grew up the exact same way as you, and they can relate and say, Steve, how did you start to see the world the way you see it now? Now, James may say, that's not how I grew up. I grew up and I had black friends, I had this. I always had different people over at my house. Okay, great. You guys didn't grow up the same.
Yeah.
But then likewise, neither of you can speak for what it is to grow up as a black man. I grew up in a community. My family was one of the few black families there.
Yeah.
You can't speak to what it is to be a teenage kid and have people throw beer bottles at you as you're just walking down Main Street, right? And screaming out things that just, it hurts you. And you go, what'd I do? I was just walking.
Right.
But you can't talk about that, but I also can't talk about what you can.
That's right.
So again, we have to just be open to people's perspectives.
And that's why I'm a fan of the committee approach. I think that if you have a committee, even for trainings, you have a diverse training group, or you even have a recruiting committee that decides hiring and firing, and not just that one person. I think that's the best way to get rid of that perception and reality, or unconscious bias is the legal term you hear a lot thrown out there.
Yeah, we recommend that to all of our clients. When you're interviewing a candidate, make sure you're all looking for the same thing. So we've got to define that, use some of the tools that are out there to try to remove some of that bias, because it's easy to recruit for skills, but then use some of the data out there around behaviors and so on, so that you're removing any of that, as much as you can, some of that unintended, in some instances, bias, because you're dealing with, they can do the job and they've got the behaviors to do the job. Don't worry about skin color or anything else. So I agree with you on that. Okay, I'm going to go with you to you on this one first, and then the next one after this will be interesting. Should specific diversity hiring goals be tied to executive compensation and bonuses? What are the pros and cons and the legalities of that?
So quotas are illegal, and a lot of companies don't realize that. So if you said you have to hire 3 minorities in order to have that impact your compensation, that would essentially be requiring a quota on that executive. And so that would be illegal, especially if one of the people that were qualified and rejected learned that.
Is that just a Michigan thing, or is that a federal law? Because I think a lot of people that are watching this are probably reeling at that, because they probably have incentives for hitting specific diversity objectives.
Federal law. So federal law quotas are purely illegal. All you can do is open up where you're seeking applicants.
And that's hard, right? Because as people now are saying, well, wait a minute, I'm trying to increase diversity and inclusion in my company. How do I do that, James?
Right.
Well, again, you can't have quotas. You, as an organization, you can't sit down and say, by next year, we want 10% of our workforce to look like, no, you can't do that. However, you can say, we want to increase cultural diversity within our organization. That you can say.
Of course.
But can't put a number to it, because now all of a sudden, in a court of law, they'll look and say, okay, so to reach that 10%, who did you not hire? And they're probably going to.
But in reality, that's happening. I'm having
It
clients call me saying, James, can I get a couple candidates that are this skin color? And I mean, do you mean someone that's committed to diversity and inclusion? Yeah, that's what I mean. But or they know what to say, but when they say the legal word, they're really saying, find me that candidate.
So what about, we get requests quite often, because we do a fair amount of diversity search stuff, that of every X candidates, one happens to be diverse. Is that the same thing as quotas, or is that not because you're not hiring them? Is there any legal issues there?
I think as long as you're qualified for the job, there's no legal issue with having
Candidate slates.
a candidate slate.
Okay.
I think it's okay to have it. You want diverse applications.
Of course.
So I think as long as you're having diverse applications and you have a diverse committee making the decisions, I wouldn't put much requirements beyond that.
Okay.
Well, and I'll say, again, a plug for organizations like yours, a lot of times it's what pond are you fishing in?
Yeah.
Right.
If maybe you've had great success with this organization or this school that's in a predominantly white community, well, what are you going to get as far as candidates, right? You're only going to get candidates that look like the people that go to that school. It's when you cast your net much wider or focus in other areas, now those applicants start to look like the population you're looking for.
Yeah, that second point is actually a really key point. It was it Wells Fargo we talked about?
Yeah.
Came out and said, well, we can't hire diverse because they're not there. So I get part of what he says. Because if you go to the other banks, there is a small percentage of diversity in those particular positions. But you said something interesting. Go beyond that. There's skill sets that actually transfer over. So if you're fishing in the pond, yeah, there is a small percentage of diversity in investment banking. We know it. It's a problem. Everybody's got to deal with it. So let's go outside of investment banking to try to find people to come into the pond and create a bigger pond. And I don't see enough companies doing that. There's no intentionality around it. It's just they're not there. Right. So guess what? They'll never be there.
And there's a problem with too many companies trying to automate the process and take this test, and the highest scores get to have the interview, and you can't make your decision solely based on these tests, because there's been studies showing that could be potentially attracting more white individuals than could be culturally biased in the testing.
Okay, so I have you answered this. One of the questions that came on early on is, why didn't Mr. Russell talk about racism to his kids?
Oh.
You did.
Oh, yeah.
I know you did.
Yeah, so, no, I'll answer that directly. I have had to talk to my kids about racism. I have had to talk to my kids about, unfortunately, there are people in this world that will see them differently because of the color of their skin. And I've also talked to them about the responsibility that we have as blacks to open doors for those that will come after us. And that means that person who's talking to you, maybe for the first time, ever having a conversation with a black person, that you have the opportunity to change their perspective on who or what a black person could be. So I've had several conversations with my kids about racism, but I've also followed that conversation quickly with, we will not judge anybody on a generalized basis. We will look at individuals and their actions.
Right. Yeah, I think the question was related to, why was your son scared? And it wasn't because of your talks, it was just because of...
Yeah, that one, I'll tell you, it hit us all fast, right? I mean, listen, as a black male, I'll say it, we always knew social injustice was out there. We knew some of these things were happening. And then all of a sudden you look up, there's a guy getting a police officer's knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, of which we were reeling as a culture. Blacks were hurt. We were discouraged. It was a painful time. Then you look up and you see these riots, and you're discouraged. You're embarrassed sometimes. You're looking at these people walking out of Target with big screen TVs, and you're going, how did that help? That only hurt. That only pushed us further back.
Yeah.
And frankly, you're trying to figure out how to put that into an 11-year-old's world when frankly, most adults that I talk to can't figure this out. So the reason we as parents also, I think my wife and I would say, we were still struggling with, do you have that conversation just yet with an 11-year-old? And the answer is yes, you have to at their level.
So we got time for one more, and I want to, David, if you could pull up the Martin Luther King quote, if you've got it pre-programmed in there. You mentioned Martin Luther King earlier, and we've kind of talked about this. But here's what kind of came in. Martin Luther King Jr. said this: "There is nothing more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Do you think this applies today to some of the dialogue we are having? Ouch. Let me repeat it one more time because it's not on the screen yet. There is nothing more dangerous than sincere, heartfelt ignorance. I put in the word heartfelt, and conscientious stupidity. There's a whole lot to unpack there.
There is.
Do you think this applies today to some of the dialogue we're having?
Absolutely. And I
How?
think the hard thing is nobody wants to say what you said a few minutes ago. You said the way you grew up, there was some racism.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Most people don't want to say that, Steve, especially when they're sitting right next to a black man. Right?
You don't scare me.
Wait till the camera's no. Most people don't want to say that. Most people don't want to admit that. Most people don't want to say, I don't understand. I had a conversation with my pastor when all this started, and he was trying to relate, and we got to a point where I said to him, it's okay to say that you don't understand what it is to be a black man. It's okay. And he said, you're right. It's okay for me to not understand why did you grow up with some form of racism. Well, guess what? We started to figure it out. You didn't have anybody that was black in your community, so what could you see? And if we listen, guys, this is real deep. If you go back to when you were growing up, I was growing up, going to a store to buy a Barbie doll. Did you see black Barbie dolls? No. And then there was one, right? You may have 40 different Barbies, blonde hair, brown hair, all types of Barbies and different dresses. And then over way to the left, you saw one little black Barbie doll. Ken, guess what? When I got my first Ken doll, he didn't look like me.
Yeah.
Right? And then there was a bunch of different Kens, and then there's finally Black Ken. Okay? Think about cartoons when we grew up as kids. Charlie Brown had one black kid on there. Right? One. You start to look at the cartoon. The only cartoon that ever featured blacks ended up being, Fat Albert. Right?
Sid the Science Kid.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. But you start to think about you're growing up as a kid, and nobody looks like me. There's no superheroes that look like me. There's no dolls that look like me. Maybe I'm not good, right? But then when you're growing up, you're seeing maybe the news. And I swear blacks for years would always say something goes wrong and you've got to interview that person, right? There would be that one black person that they picked out of an entire crowd talking, man, I'll tell you what happened, man. It was crazy, man. There was guns shooting everywhere. Man. And you're like, really? That's the only person you could find to interview? Yeah. Really? Like anybody else. But true. Guess what? Unfortunately, if that's all you see, that becomes your perspective of all blacks. So the point is, we as a people have to step back and say, wow, was there any form of racism? Was there anything in my heart that maybe I didn't learn? James has heard me say it. When I was a kid, my mom told me I couldn't be president. I told her I wanted to be president. And she said, oh, honey, that'll never happen. And I went, why? And she said, we'll never see a black president. Now,
well, that changed.
Sure did. And I'll tell you what, when that changed, I wanted to go to my mom and say, Mom, you were wrong. No, it was the only time. Just because she ever watches this, I always have to preface that. But guess what? As a kid, she didn't tell me you can go be anything. So I said, when that election took place, and you had Barack, you had Hillary, you had others, right? I looked and I said, the reason I was that happy that day, it didn't have to do with, Barack Obama. But no. It wasn't that. And people have asked, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I vote for people. I vote for the right person, in my opinion. But for the first time in history, I could look at any of my children, sons daughters, black, white, Native American, Hispanic, and say, if you want to be president, you can. Right?
Yep.
Anybody can
Right.
run now.
That's
Anybody
right.
can have that opportunity. But we as a people have to get to the point that you were at where you say, maybe I don't see everything correctly. Maybe the way I was raised was a little bit different. And when you take some of those cultural biases and really start to be surgical, now the ignorance and the stupidity leaves because we're trying to just educate ourselves and become better people.
And I think you said the key piece. All people need to be
people.
able to do that. It's not just white people need to do that. African Americans need to do that. Hispanics, Asian, it doesn't matter who it is. We
Yeah.
all need to do that. What's your thoughts on that same quote?
There's another side to ignorance and stupidity beyond just not knowing things. If you say a word and don't understand how other people are going to interpret it, that is what I consider to be the biggest danger, because people post things on Facebook and LinkedIn and social media knowing it's going to be seen by many.
Yeah.
And at the time they're posting it, they often don't realize how inappropriate or stupid they're coming across. So, for example, successful business owner, the Detroit Popcorn, made some comment, neon neck. And I don't know what he meant. Allegedly, he didn't mean anything racist, but how could you say such a thing in this day and age and not be offensive to people? And so, as a result of that, Quicken Loans and the Detroit Zoo stop ordering popcorn. Businesses can be destroyed. So I think you got to have a perspective on how your words are going to be interpreted.
Do you guys think that and we're going to end with this, that the riots, because the riots are not just black people. In fact, in many of them, they're more white than they are black in some instances, right? Do you think that's conscientious stupidity? Tough question, right? Putting you on the spot there.
Steve, you said you were going to be a real tough one. I'll go back to what I said earlier. It's you got to look at each person, because there's people who are out peacefully protesting that are doing it for the right reason,
I would
with
agree
the
with
right
that.
motivation. When you look at the riots, it's stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, and if I offend someone, I apologize. But guess what? You turned in. I said the gloves were off. You setting fire to a building, you spray painting a building, you doing any of that, it does not help. And there was a video that I saw, and it was so ironic. It was a younger white woman who was spray painting a Starbucks, Black Lives Matter. And a black woman came up to her and said, "You stop that. You stop that right now. We didn't ask you to do that." And I went, how powerful. Here was somebody that just, young adult wanted to jump onto a cause, and we're mad and we're angry and we need change and we're going to spray paint. And the black woman who was older said, "We didn't ask you to do that. We didn't ask you to set
Older
fire
and
to
wiser
the-"
at that point.
But that's the thing. Destructive behavior will not get us anywhere. And if I can, the last thing I'll say is the other Martin Luther King Jr. quote that if we all subscribe to this, we'll get there. He said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that."
Which is referenced from the Bible originally. That's where I
got
got it
it.
from. James, closing comments on this whole thing.
Yeah.
In fairness, we've only scratched the surface, but at least we've had some conversation about some real things.
I think the closing comments are, I looked at the history outline and I see things, progressing significantly and positive. Like, these Brown's Board of Education was only 60 some years ago. So I feel like in the 60 years we've advanced. And what I'm seeing from keynote speeches is the next generation, my kids have friends of all races. There's a lot more diversity. We live in Ann Arbor. So I think that the next generations are going to continue to make things better, I think, for diversity and inclusion and breaking down those stereotypes and barriers. So I think things are promising.
Well, and thank you for that, both of you guys. Thank you for the time. I mean, the whole purpose of doing this is to answer give you our perspective on some of these questions that people are almost afraid to ask, because you don't see it happening in the news, you don't see it happening in the paper, and you don't even see a lot of this happening in social media unless it's actually being derogatory from one group to the other group or something along those lines. Is understanding that we are different, embracing the fact that we're different is what I've been talking about for a long time. Look, if you're watching this and you think somebody should see it, this is live, but the recorded version will be on LinkedIn, it'll be on Facebook, it'll be just about everywhere else. Definitely send it around. And we know we're probably going to get some hate mail as well.
Oh, yeah.
And that's okay as long as it creates a purpose to have a conversation around it. So my guess is we'll probably want to continue this discourse if you guys are willing to do it at some point, whether we do it next month or the month
Absolutely.
after. I think it's got to continue to have conversations, but I'd really like to drill in deeper on some of the things that we all talked about, right? How did I grow up? How did you grow up? How did you grow up to where you guys have been friends for years and so forth? I think it's just fascinating because it carries over into the workplace. Because we talk about separating ourselves from who we are at work. You can't do that. No. We are who we are, and the whole person shows up to work. So this does
agree.
impact.
And I wanted to leave the audience with two things. Not only look where we're at, where are we going?
Yeah.
And at the Supreme Court, we just appointed a new justice that has a religious background, and religious rights are becoming more popular. And we have a case we're handling right now in Michigan is, should fraternities allow any women to come into the fraternity and live in the fraternity and have the same rights, equal rights in fraternities? So this is not just a racial discussion. These are opening into religion, sex, other things in the workplace. So stay tuned for more to come.
And we can't say anything if we're not involved.
Exactly. And the moment we stop trying to make an impact, nothing will happen.
Yeah.
We'll all just talk about it. We've seen it with politics recently. There's just a lot of mudslinging. And the moment James says, I support this candidate, I want to come back and, how dare you support A, B, C, D? And he goes, no. I didn't say I support all that. I said, this is the candidate I'm voting for. And next thing you know, I'm attacking him. Listen, that's not the way we move forward. We move forward with this.
Yeah.
We challenge one another, and we challenge one another to become better. And Steve said something, and it's one of the main reasons I'm so excited to come speak today, was he said, Dan, we won't always agree on some of these items. In fact, we'll challenge each other. And that's good because that means we're challenging you who are watching, right? Because, no, we're not all just, oh, yeah, that's great, Steve, James, that's another good point. Right. No, we want to challenge each other, and we want to challenge you. And I'll tell you what, this is great, and I'd be happy to come back.
Yeah, you gave me, I'm going to close with this because you gave me an interesting perspective, and I was just recently having this conversation with my wife, and I'm a pretty non-racist guy at this point, I believe, coming where I came from, right? And we're like, well, if more of these kids would just put their hands on 10 and 2, they wouldn't have the aggression from the cops, and there is that fear on both sides as well, right? But hearing the story that you also, gives me a different appreciation for what you went through, because I've never been now I've been pulled out of a car by cops being a white guy, right, when I was young too, but I'd never heard the story quite like that from somebody who just experienced it and says, look, I still have a respect for the cops as a result of that, because they're individuals and not groups. And we got to stop the whole group thing that's going on right now. It's you're either for me or against me. Your group is either for me or against me because you associate, is freaking unbelievably stupid, in my opinion.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think, like you said, there's a lot more to uncover, unbox. And, listen, the great thing is I'm sitting here looking at all the comments, all the chats, the people watching. That's what's great.
Yeah.
Because people are saying, Thursday at 10 o'clock, I want to get better. I want to learn. I'm okay with being challenged. And there's people that are going to hit end and go, man, how do I really feel about that?
Yeah.
And that's what this is about. And so as long as we all continue to do these things, the world's going to become a better place.
So a couple of ways for you to get involved. If you've got thoughts after this, definitely post them under the video. Send us an email. Your cell again, go ahead and give it out, James.
734-649, Lucky 1313. Text any questions, happy to respond.
Mine's 734-837-8500, and I'm not going to assume you're going to give yours out, but if you want to.
I'll give mine out, 248
Peer pressure.
219-6360. I'm open to any comments. Like I said, gloves off, and I love challenging stuff.
So that's one way to get involved. Post your questions, text one of us, we can do that. If you want to come on, if you're in the local Detroit area and you want to come on and be live, socially distanced, temperature, all that kind of stuff, let us know. We'll have you on. And if you want to come on through video and you want to have a discussion, whether you agree with some of these things or disagree, I don't want people, we don't all agree on everything. We don't.
Right.
And I know we don't because we come from different perspectives. And if you want to have a dialogue about it, as long as it's done with the intent of understanding the opposite side, not with the intent of bashing the other side, please come on. We'd love to have the conversation with you. But with that, guys, again, thank you for the time. We'll see you in about a month, and we'll have some additional diversity at the table about a month from now. I think it's going to be the 19th of next month, but you may not be here. I believe you are committed. So we're going to get a stand-in, a fill-in for you so we can keep it at about. So we'll see you again in December.
All right, see you then.
We'll talk about when you're able to come back as well, Dan.
Absolutely. Would love the opportunity.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.
Thank you.